Welcome to this Negotiation Masterclass edition of Negotiate Anything. With over 1,600 episodes featuring some of the world's brightest minds, we've carefully curated 3 powerful conversations for you. What makes this so special is that you'll hear how different experts from different industries approach the same challenge in their own unique ways. Our goal is to give you multiple perspectives so you can build your own unique style. Success doesn't look the same for everyone, and in this masterclass, you will see exactly why. Let's dive in.
Matthew, thanks for joining us today.
Mate, I'm ecstatic to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. So how about you get us started by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So, I'm known as the rapid growth guy. I'm also the best-selling author of the Introverts Edge book series, which I think have sold about 75,000 copies together, and they're in about 16 languages. But what really was my claim to fame is I built 5 multi-million-dollar success stories from the ground up. And really, I had no right to do that because I was an introvert that was really terrified of my own shadow. And everyone knows you've got to be a successful salesperson, you've got to be successful at networking, you've got to be successful at so many things to be successful at business. And yet I found my way to doing it, and it was really completely accidental. I had a reading speed of a 6th grader in late high school. I was super introverted. And if it wasn't for losing my job just before Christmas and the only job I could get being door-to-door sales and teaching myself how to sell watching YouTube videos, I really wouldn't be the person I am today, which is why I spend my life really educating introverts that they're not second-class citizens. Their path to success is just different to that of an extrovert. And if they embrace that and embrace systems that allow them to leverage their natural strengths, they truly can have a rapid growth business that they love. They can have an amazing career. They can be an amazing public speaker. They can do so many things that they just know that they can't do because they don't have that gift of gab. Well, that's rubbish. They absolutely can.
This is great. I'm so excited about this. And Matthew, I think a good place for us to start is your unique definition of introversion. So tell us about what it is, and then also what a lot of the misconceptions are that end up confusing people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting when you talk about introversion. Firstly, a lot of people still don't know what introversion and extroversion is, which is crazy because realistically, we need to understand ourselves as people. If we don't understand ourselves as people, we don't know what skill sets that we have naturally. We don't know what skills gaps we have that we need to look for training and coaching to help get beyond. For instance, some might say that extroverts aren't the best listeners in the world, and introverts have that in spades. Introverts, of course, have their own barriers, and that's really the way I look at introversion and extroversion. We all have our burdens to bear. The truth is we just have skills gaps that we have to learn how to compensate for. And actually, some of those skills gaps give us amazing advantages with the extra skill sets that we have learned over a lifetime. So when I look at introversion and extroversion, I think psychologists they've made a lot of money making it very confusing. So I try to simplify it to something really, really easy for everybody to just go, oh, I'm introverted, I'm extroverted, which is where you draw your energy from. For instance, I founded a festival in Austin, Texas. It's grown to be the number 3 conference in America for small business. And, I remember when we did our first big conference, and the last day, one of the speakers was Jim Cathcart. He's a great personal friend of mine. He's one of the most award-winning speakers in the world. And he and I were both involved in the event the entire 3-day period. He had a wonderful time. I had a wonderful time. The difference was on day 3, he wanted to go down Rainy Street in Austin and experience the live music capital of the world because he was jazzed, he was buzzing, he was so energized because he was around people. I wanted to put on a hoodie, go home and watch Netflix. I didn't want to have anything to do with hanging out with people at that point. Now, I remember that he was my guest, so I had to take him out that night, and I have never had to, the guy's 70. I've never had to ask a 70-year-old before in my life, can I please go home now? I was exhausted. So the difference is just this. If you draw your energy from being around people, you're an extrovert. If you draw your energy from being by yourself, you're an introvert. Now, that doesn't mean that because you're an introvert, you don't like people, you don't like networking, you don't like sales. Now, I've had people that have said to me, Matt, I do not want to learn sales. I want you to teach me the marketing stuff so I don't have to sell. And then I've said, well, let's just do a little bit of sales. Let me train you just so we can validate that the words that you're using work so we can build it onto a website so you never have to speak to someone again. And those people have grown to love sales and now they don't want to give it up. So the key is that usually an introvert is terrible at a lot of these extroverted arenas or so-called extroverted arenas because we don't have a system and process to follow that in truth, once we have, allows us to leverage our natural skills to beat out the extroverts hands down. Now, that's not to say that the extroverts can't learn these skill sets and strategies, but the truth is extroverts tend to like to wing things. They have to take a big back step to then catapult forward, and they're less likely to do it. Where for introverts, we're kind of terrible at sales, networking, negotiation. So without those strategies, we're not going to do well. So of course, we're willing to do the legwork up front so that we can excel. And, a system will always outperform a winged process every day of the week and twice on Sunday eventually, and actually it doesn't take that long. Now, the misconceptions are pretty simple. A lot of people say things like, oh, I used to be introverted, but don't worry, I'm extroverted now, like introversion's a bad thing. It's not a curse, it's an advantage. In my world, it gives you an edge because you're more prone to learning a system, and you've got these amazing advantages of active listening and empathy that take time for extroverts to learn and actually require a lot of coaching to learn and do and achieve well. Now, other people will say things like, oh, I used to be really extroverted, but since COVID, I'm now more introverted. No, that's just a behavior or a habit that you used to have a habit of going out a lot. And now you like watching Netflix. But the truth is, if you go out and you're actually motivated and energized because you went out, you're an extrovert. It doesn't change who you are just because you don't want to do it as often anymore. You'll find as long as you're drawing your energy from being with people or drawing your energy from being by yourself, that's the simplest way to really decide who you are.
Oh, this is great. This is really great. And one of the things that I love about this is the fact that you're really introducing a paradigm shift where a lot of times introverts have this bias against themselves saying that, oh, because of this tendency I have, because of this personality trait that I have, I cannot do X, Y, Z. But what you're saying is not only can you, but you're taking it to the next level and saying, not only can you, but you can do it at a higher level. And I'll show you how. And the thing that you keep on saying is systems and processes. So tell us more about those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think that it's really interesting. Like the topic of introversion, extroversion is relatively recent. And, there's been some pretty important battles to have fought before that, right? You had the women's movement, and before there was like women couldn't be in the workforce, right? And we've still got a long way to fight. We've got race, we've got religion, we've got all these things that we're trying to work through in both small business, in corporates, and, making people realize that everybody has advantages and disadvantages. There's upbringing stories, there's, whether or not somebody, people win the lottery because they have the natural gift of gab. Maybe, maybe not. People win the lottery because they grew up rich. Maybe, maybe not, right? I've seen a lot of people that grew up rich that have had horrible lives. I've seen a lot of people that grew up poor that made something of themselves that some rich kids would just dream of being. The truth is, introversion is exactly that. If we create this story about why we can't succeed, then all of a sudden, we have we're not pushing ourselves to succeed. If we believe our own story, of course, we're not going to push ourselves through it. We're not going to spend the time learning a system. And look, this is probably the easiest way to explain it. When I was as I said, in late high school, I had a reading speed of a sixth grader. I was super introverted. And I just had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And my family could see that, if I went to college at that point, I was going to spin out. I wouldn't have been able to succeed. Now, I did, luckily enough, get diagnosed with this thing called Irlen syndrome. Now, for the video watchers at home, it basically means I can put on this pair of funny colored lenses and miraculously I can learn to read. Now, I couldn't read like everyone else. I could start the process of learning to read. So, I hustled for the last 2 years of high school I actually got into the top 20% of my state. But I always felt like the slow kid. Now I'm the slow kid that had braces, had bad acne, and funny colored lenses. My confidence wasn't exactly at an all-time high. So I took a job at a real estate agency to have my gap year. I'm sure people that are listening have had kids that have had gap years. And, my gap year was really to find myself. Now, I know what you're thinking. Real estate, I was probably the guy out selling. I wasn't. I was the guy in the back office with a look on my face saying, don't speak to me. I'm just here to do data entry. I'm here to find myself for the year. Well, 3 weeks into that job, my boss pulls me aside and he's like, Matt, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but we've just discovered that they're shutting down, their head office is shutting down this office. You're out of a job. I'd been there 3 weeks. Now, in Australia, I mean, we have summer break and Christmas break at the same time. And I lost my job just before Christmas. And just before Christmas in Australia means everyone goes off on the 20th of December and they don't come back till the 15th to 20th of January. So if you can imagine being a small business at that point, put your hand up if you think you're going to be hiring. You're not hiring anyone. The only jobs in the paper are these things called commission-only sales roles. So I applied for this job doing commission-only sales because the only thing that was more terrifying than going to apply for a door-to-door sales role was telling my father, who broke his back 80 hours a week, sorry, out of a job, going to sit on the couch and watch Oprah for the rest of the summer. It just wasn't going to be okay in my family. So there were 3 jobs. I applied for all 3. I got 3 interviews. Then I got all 3 jobs. And I was like, maybe they see something in me that I don't see in myself. Well, my training manager put that little chip on my shoulder to bed really, really quickly. He said, Matt, we just hire everyone. We've got this saying, we throw mud up against the wall and we see what sticks. Fun saying until you realize you're the mud. Well, so here I am after 5 days product training and not a single second of sales training. I get thrown on this road called Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia. This is like 1,000 doors on each side, just little junk stores. And I get told to go sell. Well, I didn't know what to say. So I take this deep breath and I go to walk in, and luckily enough, I was politely told to leave because the next door I was sworn at, but my personal favorite was always getting told to go and get a real job. This was the only job I could get. Door after door, this kept happening. I got sworn at, told to get a real job, politely told to leave, till my 93rd door where I made my first sale. And I remember I made about $70. And I was ecstatic for about 45 seconds until I had my second realization for the day. I got to do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next, and this was not okay. So I went, all right, so I can do what 18 of my training group of 20 did the following day. I could have quit, or I could have decided to do what the other person that stayed decided to do. I'm just going to grind it out. I'll just hustle and maybe it'll work, which, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of business owners that are doing that. And as opposed to giving up, absolute tribute to them. But the truth is that there's a third path that nobody ever thinks of, which is, what if there was another solution to this problem? And with gift of gab kind of ideology, or when confronted with gift of gab, we believe it's either tough it out or quit. That's it. But the truth is, I made the decision that there was another way. And what I discovered was that sales was a system like anything else. And that's what I had to really come to terms with. I went, what if sales was a system? Well, how would I learn that system? And what I realized is, of course, there are all these books out about sales and sales systemization, but the truth is I had a reading speed of a 6th grader. I couldn't exactly pick one up and read it. It would have taken me a year to read it, let alone apply it. This was before podcasts and all the online learning we have today, but there was this cool tool called YouTube that had just been out for a couple of years at that point. And so I took a punt. I typed in sales system and all these videos came up. And so every day, what I would do is I would focus on one step of the system. And I'd go out and I'd apply what I learned the 8 hours the night before during the 8 hours that I was out selling. So every day was 8 hours out selling, applying what I learned. That night, I'd go home and I'd spend 8 hours learning the next thing or how to perfect the thing that I was working on. Day after day, I did that. Weekends, I'd spend 16 hours learning and practicing. Now, I'm sure to everyone, this does not sound fun. It was horrific. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But 6 weeks in, and this is all it took, very quickly, my sales improved. I went from, 93 doors to 78 to 46 to 21 to 18 to 7 to 3. I got it down to closing a deal every third door I went to. Now, 6 weeks in, my manager pulls me aside and he's like, well, I thought I was in trouble, by the way, because my manager pulled me aside and he had this puzzled look on his face. And I was the quiet guy that handed my paperwork in downstairs and then would listen to all the boisterous reps upstairs, talking about, how they closed that deal or how the market's getting harder. Well, he looked at me and he said, Matt, we're kind of puzzled by this, but we just got the national sales figures. And in truth, I didn't really even know who your name was up until today. But, it turns out you're the number one salesperson in the company. Now, this was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. So I'd gone from scared to sell to being the number one person that was currently, working in a commission-only sales job for that organization. So they went, oh, well, obviously, because you can sell, you could probably manage. Well, I don't know why people think that. It just baffles me that people think that's the same skill, right? So no, I got given my own 20 people and he said, don't worry, just mud up against the wall, see what sticks. No one stuck. They all quit. Everyone, within 48 hours, everybody was gone. Well, I went back to YouTube and I learned how to manage. I actually got pretty good at it. Well, less than a year later, I was promoted 7 times. And then, fast forward just shy of a decade, I'd started my own business and I'd been responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories. So the thing that I want people to understand is, yes, of course, my 6-week period was horrible. Now, I could have broken that 6-week period over 3 months, 6 months. And remember, I went from the worst, having no business being in sales, to the best person in the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. Most small business owners don't have to get that good, so they don't even really need to work that hard. What they've just got to realize is that sales is a methodical process, a step-by-step process that leads to a sale. And if you pick the right process, you can get rid of all those bulldog hard closes, the things that we just as introverts find uncomfortable. Now, when I came to the United States, I had to separate myself from an awkward network, well, let's just say a network that I'd awkwardly fostered over the last 10 years and completely start again. And because of that, I went from knowing no one and really struggling to articulate the value I offered, because I decided to become a coach and consultant to teach people how to do what I do. I even spoke on the topic. And it's funny, when you say to somebody you're a sales trainer, they look at you like you're one step above a scam artist, right? Especially introverts, they're like, oh yeah, I can't sell. I had somebody try once and it just didn't work, right? You say you're a marketer, they go, oh, that's interesting. How much do you cost? Now you're talking about price. You just met them. So I had to realize that there was another strategy that I needed to learn, which was how to network in a way that sidestepped the commodity bucket that got me straight away talking about price or got them to disqualify me. And what I realized is networking could have a similar methodical process that I put together by taking what other people did, looking at what worked for me, and creating some unique theory of my own. And then I started speaking from stage. And now I'm one of the most award-winning speakers, in the world of sales. And I've spoken on stages like Microsoft Inspire, for Intel, for Oracle. I do all these presentations. I'm, one of the most requested speakers in the small business space. And again, it's a similar methodical process. You can apply this to negotiation. You can apply it to parenting. The truth is, there is not one behavior that you will not benefit from having a methodical process that you plan and prepare. What you've got to realize is that introverts, in a lot of ways, have an advantage because they're willing to take those steps to actually learn that methodical process. And you don't even need to learn it that well. And truthfully, the process doesn't even need to be that good. If you just pick a process and stick to it, forget about the bells and whistles. This is what introverts do, and anyone learning a process does wrong. They read all the books, and then they're trying to put it all together into a format that works best for them. It doesn't matter what process you follow somebody's methodical process without the bells and whistles till you get that right. It will probably still outperform what you're currently doing. Then add the bells and whistles on later. By trying to add the bells and whistles on and over-educate ourselves, what we're actually doing is overcomplicating it. We're doing what I call busy procrastination, trying to do the things that feel comfortable while avoiding the thing that feels uncomfortable, whether it's because we're an introvert and we don't actually want to sell, we don't actually want to network, we don't want to negotiate, or it feels uncomfortable to try and piece together a process because it feels more comfortable, even though it doesn't result in great results and it doesn't feel comfortable to get rejected. It feels more comfortable just to wing things, right? So we avoid that. So the only piece of advice that I will give you is that anyone that is an introvert, it's best to learn off an introvert, because the truth is that the hardest thing for an introvert to do is not learn a sales system, learn a networking process, a way of negotiation, but instead believe that they can. So if you're getting trained by an extroverted coach or speaker or author that says, it's easy, you just do this, first thing that goes in your head, well, it's not easy for me, my situation's different. Same for an extrovert. Of course, my processes and systems will work for you, but for an you have a lot of advantages that I don't. You don't have some skill sets that I have. And because of that, it's best for you to learn off somebody that's extroverted that maybe had to learn active listening and empathy or how to demonstrate that. Things that I got naturally because I'm an introvert. So it's always best to follow somebody that has a similar natural skill set. And that's why, I wrote the book, The Introvert's Edge, which focuses on sales, The Introvert's Edge to Networking, which focuses on networking. But truthfully, just because I have the word introvert stamped on the cover doesn't mean I'm the only person out there teaching this stuff. Like, if you think about sales, Jeb Blunt, Mark Hunter, Lee Salz, goodness, Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer and probably one of the most well-known speakers in the world, is introverted. If you think about networking, Matt Alderton, the founder of BX Networking, Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI. These people are, I mean, they're networking titans. They're both introverted. It doesn't really matter what skill set you can think of. There's an introvert out there that has mastered it, that's written a book on teaching it.
All right, let's talk about something that's actually a negotiation skill. Taking care of yourself before you show up to negotiate with anybody else. Because if you're tired, stressed, and running on fumes, you're going to make worse decisions. Period. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Cozy Earth. Cozy Earth's whole mission is to elevate the everyday with obsessive detail and better materials so you can feel it immediately. Their bamboo pajama set that's made from viscose from bamboo is unbelievably soft. It drapes really nicely, and the classic cuddle blanket, that thing is dangerous because once you wrap up in it, you're not getting anything done. It's plush, it has a comforting weight, and makes your home feel like a reset button. And here's the best part. It is completely risk-free. Cozy Earth gives you a 100-night sleep trial and a 10-year warranty, so they really stand behind the quality. So this month, show a little extra love to someone you care about or yourself. Go to CozyEarth.com and use my code Kwame for up to 20% off. And if you get a post-purchase survey, make sure to let them know that you heard about Cozy Earth right here. Here's a quick warning for everyone listening. Scams and identity theft usually don't start with some genius hacker. Most of the time, it's just because your personal data is so easy to find online. I'm talking about people search sites, shady directories, and places where anyone can pull up your address, phone number, and even your relatives' info. And then they use that leverage to impersonate you or target your family, and that's how these scams usually work. That's why I've been using Incogni. Instead of you spending hundreds of hours manually trying to opt out of these sites yourself, Incogni just automates the whole thing. They act as your proxy, taking down your data and demanding its removal from databases you've probably never heard of. And the thing is, this isn't just a one-time fix. Data has a way of popping back up, so Incogni continuously monitors these sites in the background to make sure your information stays deleted. I personally recommend the Family Unlimited plan. It's the best way for you to cover your entire household. It includes custom removals, so if you ever find a specific page exposing your family's info, you just send Incogni the link and their privacy experts handle the manual takedown for you. You can get your data back risk-free with Incogni's 30-day money-back guarantee. And if you use the code ANYTHING at incogni.com/anything, you'll get 60% off an annual plan. Again, that's incogni.com/anything. Code ANYTHING.
This is incredible. So some quick notes. First, Matthew, your storytelling is impeccable. And I know that's one of the things that you speak on. So I think next time you come on, you need to walk us through how you did what you just did, because that was really good. So I forgot I was hosting for a little bit. I was like, man, this podcast is awesome. And so kudos on that. And then I love the fact that you talk about the value of strategy, the value of a process. There's one thing that all great strategists have in common: a strategy. Like that's it. And winging it isn't a strategy, right? And I like the fact that you said a process or a strategy is better than nothing, because then it puts people in a position where they can replicate what it is that you did, because you learned, then you immediately applied, and then you started honing your skills. Okay, this works, this doesn't work. I'm going to do it incrementally better every single time. So you're essentially running a lifelong experiment. And that's really what life can and should be if we're willing to put our hypotheses into action. And that's what a lot of people don't do, because really a lot of times procrastination is just an intellectualized form of fear. We are afraid, and then we just hold back, but we convince ourselves, I'm just a thoughtful person. I like to think things through. And then we think ourselves out of doing what needs to be done. So I love the fact that you're not only focused on learning, but also being experimental and taking action, because a lot of times people don't take what they learn and put it into action. So I think all of this is really great.
One thing I will say to that is that I just talked about sales networking. You just talked about, negotiation. The truth is that if you say I'm going to learn all of those things, that's also busy procrastination, because then it will become overwhelming and you won't do any of them. So pick one frontier. Like, there's one thing that I'm working on right now. There always is one thing I'm working on right now that I plan on going from conscious incompetence, because I'm terrible at it and I know it, and moving myself to conscious competence to eventually it'll be unconscious competence. I just know exactly how to do it and it's natural. And then everyone will say, you're so lucky you just were born with that natural ability. No, I worked hard for that, right? So the thing is that you need to be fixated on one thing. And that could be just becoming a better parent, right? Getting more involved in your child's social life or whatever it takes. Pick one thing, read the books on it, read a book on it, and focus on a system and process. Listen to a bunch of podcast interviews, pick one authority on the topic and go, I'm going to go deep into that person's book and learn their system before I get creative and piece anything else together. Then turn it into a masterful level and you will succeed. Now, the truth is that, I mean, this isn't new stuff. Like Brian Tracy, who is extroverted, by the way, says the top 10% of all sales performers have a planned presentation. Now, if you think about that, I mean, the bottom 80%, he says, just says whatever comes out of their mouth, which of course extroverts are better at and why the introverts are at the bottom. But in the top 10%, funnily enough, you know, I spoke at the AAISP, which is the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals. And if you think there are, you know, of all the big brand names that you can recognize, the head of all their sales departments were at this corporate retreat. And I did a survey beforehand. Guess what? More than 50% of the people in that room were introverted. The best in the business are introverted. You go to the top 30 sales gurus list, of which I'm on, by globalgurus.org, you'll find that half of that list is more introverted than extroverted. It's common knowledge to the people that know that introversion is an advantage. The problem is the world knows that extroversion is an advantage, and that's the problem. If you think about the world of networking, you think about the skill sets that people don't like, self-promotion, obscene confidence, right? These are commonly seen as extroverted skill sets. Now, truthfully, there are skills that extroverts can learn to not come across that way, but it's not a natural thing for them. On the other side, the things that the things that people like in networking tend to be more commonly introverted strategies, but without a process to actually start a dialogue, you have a problem. The same thing when you think about speakers. If you ask me to go and deliver a topic, there's two things you're going to know. One is it's going to be pretty close to exactly what you experienced last time. So you knew it was good last time, you know it's going to be good this time. And secondly, I'm going to research your organization to the hilt to make sure that the things that are different are uniquely customized to your organization with a huge amount of knowledge behind it, because I have made sure that anything I say from stage, I don't feel self-conscious about. I don't feel like an imposter about. I need to have done my homework. A lot of times when you say to an extroverted speaker, hey, I loved what you did there, can you go and deliver it for our other department? They'll say, well, I don't even know what I said. I might be able to stay slightly, in the same framework as what I know, but maybe it's going to be probably 20, 30% different. With me, it's probably going to be 10% different, maybe 5, but every part of that is going to be planned. Now, if you think about that kind of framing and the advantage that gives you, it's huge. Now, going back to storytelling, because introverts, there's a huge power in storytelling. For instance, that story of my personal life, I've got a story of Wendy that I tell. I say, on Introvert You, I have a program called, You're One Story Away. And I talk about the fact that every business is one story away from, a rapid growth business that revolves around them, their family, and their life. Because I believe if you have one story, and it's not your story, it's a story of a customer you worked with that had a problem that you got to an amazing result. If you can share that story in a way that you don't currently tell it, trust me, because everyone says these really boring business stories. Customer wanted this, so we gave it to them. There's no emotional roller coaster. I'm talking more like the story of how you met your husband or wife, your life partner, right? If you can tell a story that has that emotional fabric to it, there are some amazing things that happens. It short circuits the logical mind, which speaks directly to the emotional mind, which, by the way, the logical part of the brain's going, that'll work for me, that won't work for me, I don't have time for this. The emotional brain literally short circuits that when it hears a story and goes, story time, and it just listens. Now, the power of that is even a host of a podcast might disengage and go, wow, this is an engaging story, and forget that they're a podcast host, right? So stories are powerful for that. People remember up to 22 times more information when embedded into a story. And thirdly, this research out of Stanford that says that when I tell a story, what happens is it activates the reticular activating system of our brains, which causes our brains to synchronize. It creates natural rapport that an introvert can then leverage into real rapport. With those three things combined, think about the power it gives you on podcast interviews, speaking from stage, selling, negotiation. It's hugely powerful when you tell a story, because what happens is you get instead of telling somebody why they're wrong or why they should see it this way, you're actually getting them to live an experience, to see it from somebody else's point of view. And as long as the moral of the story hits, that can be transformational for anyone that is listening. So if you're an introvert, especially, you can write these stories out, you can practice them, you can plan them, not in a scripted way that sounds robotic, like that telemarketer that calls you at 8 o'clock at night, that you don't want them calling you because you're trying to have a family dinner. But by the way, your favorite movies, like all of your favorite movies, they're reading from scripts too. They didn't write it out, but they remembered it, they've embraced it. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio in some of his parts, I think he's fantastic. Another introvert, by the way, but he's read the script, he's embraced the character so that he can deliver it on camera. You got to remember one story. If you can deliver one story, maybe two really well, that's all you need for your business. But most introverts will just wing it, just like the extroverts. And by the way, nobody should. If you tell one story well, it should be the same story, the same way every time. And the only change is how you're applying it to the unique circumstance they highlighted when you were networking, just before they spoke when you were negotiating. If you can do that, you can be masterful at really a lot of these so-called extroverted arenas, because story over logic wins every time. So leave your fire hose of jargon at home, tell a story instead.
Oh, this is great. This is great. Matthew, before we go, because I know we're coming up on time here, if you were to come up with one last parting word of wisdom that tells people, like, you know what? I'm going to give Matthew a 5-star review on this podcast. What would be that one parting word of wisdom for the audience?
Absolutely. So I think the piece of advice, because we were just talking about stories, is remember that stories short-circuit your logical mind and speak directly to your emotional mind. So if you're telling yourself this entire story about why it's more difficult for you because you're an introvert and because you don't find it as easy as everyone else, you're not naturally gregarious, well, that's short-circuiting your logical mind, which might be able to tell you it ain't true, because your emotional mind's hearing the moral of that story is don't try. So I'm telling you to stop telling yourself these horrible stories. One of the biggest hurdles that I find introverts have, and don't get me wrong, everybody has this, but introverts have specific dialogues that they tell themselves connected with the fact that because they don't have gift of gab, because they're not naturally gregarious, they cannot succeed. And it's stopping them from starting their own businesses. It's stopping them from having the careers that they want. It's allowing them to accept subpar performance in their careers, in their businesses, that they just wouldn't if they weren't telling themselves this monologue of, we're just lucky to be where we are today because it's tougher for us. And that's what's got to stop.
This is good. I've taken so many notes here, Matthew. You see this? This is great. I love this. So, this will not be the last time you come on the show. If I have it my way, I appreciate it. But Matthew, before you go, let the listeners know about you, how they can get in touch with you. And I know you told me not to push the products too much, but they're too good, my friend. So let them know how they can work with you too.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate you asking. So obviously for those people listening, I mean, the easiest way to check me out is obviously type in Matthew Pollard online. I mean, I'll take up the first 10 pages of Google, but truthfully, I put out so much free content on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, just because that's how I learned on YouTube, right? So I try to give back in the place that I received amazing content. But the other way that I would suggest, and my publisher hates me when I say this, but you do not need to buy either of my books. You can go to theintrovertsedge.com or theintrovertsedge.com/networking. There you'll be able to download the first chapter of both of my books. But the reason I say that is that the biggest hurdle, as I said, is for introverts to believe that they can. And in both of those books, I'll help you overcome that belief or that misbelief that you can't sell or network as an introvert. So I'll help you get over that. And then I'll outline the exact step-by-step strategy. With the sales book as an example, if you do nothing more than grab the 7-step process that I give you, look at the chapter headings that I give you for the exact process you should follow. Look at what you currently say and fit it into that. You'll quickly realize there's some things out of order. There's some things that don't fit. Like, throw that out. You shouldn't be saying that to customers. Then you'll realize there's some gaping holes, like telling great stories, asking great questions. If you do nothing more than do that, you'll double your sales easily in the next 60 days. And then their networking book will help you do the exact same. So those links are theintrovertsedge.com and theintrovertsedge.com/networking. And, the other thing you're definitely welcome to try, we just released a new platform called Introvert U, and it is a learning hub specifically for introverts. And the whole goal is that we're not teaching these mega training trainings on that platform. It's like a Netflix style platform that focuses on introverts all over the world because, my brand's grown to a point that I'm trying to showcase other introverted experts, or what I call introverted titans, which are industry experts that just happen to be introverted. And what we're getting them to do is create what I call a micro course, which is where, instead of teaching someone how to play the guitar, for the lack of a better example, they're teaching somebody how to play one song with 3 chords. A simple training that focuses on one tangible, instantly applicable ideology that an introvert can learn and apply tomorrow to better their small businesses and better their lives. So you definitely, I'd love you to check out the Introvert's Edge.com as well as Introvert U, where you can see those micro trainings. And that's also where the One Story Away training is hosted as well.
Oh, this is fantastic. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It was my pleasure to be here, mate. And thank you for having me, and thank you for for outing yourself as an introvert. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for the increased self-awareness.
That was the first part of today's masterclass. Up next, we'll hear from another expert with a different approach, giving you even more strategies to add to your toolkit. Let's keep it rolling. Beth, thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's great to be here, Kwame.
Yeah, pleasure to have you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, I have to say, as an introvert, this is a hard question. Mostly because we tend not to like to talk about ourselves. So I'm going to answer this a little bit differently than I usually do, because this sort of thing has been on my mind. And it came up in a book group recently, this question of not necessarily who you are and what you do, but a variation. What's the primary gift that you share with the world? And so I'm thinking less about defining myself by my work and more by my gifts and my preferences. So when I heard that question, and as I think about your question, the immediate thing that comes into my head is I see people. And I do that through coaching, photography, writing, podcasting, and facilitating. I synthesize and I create safe spaces. So those are the gifts that kind of define who I am and what I do. And right now, all of that's manifesting through being a coach, primarily for introvert entrepreneurs, and doing speaking and writing. And with anyone that I work with, my goal is actually the same as my book subtitle, which is amplify their strengths and create success on their own terms. So that's me.
I love it. That's such a brilliant way to answer that question. I'm definitely going to steal that one.
Please, I hope to spread the word.
So with introvert coaching, what does that consist of?
Well, coaching is about, I see it as being a witness and a guide. And in working with introverts, I think especially we have been sort of underserved, at least until, a few years ago, and not necessarily been seen and heard of other people. So in working with introverts, and especially as entrepreneurs, my goal is to support them in seeing their personality, their energy as a strength, not as a liability, and to be able to lead with those strengths and to be able to identify, because we all have challenges. And often the things that are challenging for introverts are things that are absolutely essential to being a successful entrepreneur. And so how can we look at the strengths that we have and leverage them such that they help to offset some of those challenges? Or how can we bring other resources into our business, whether they're technology or people or learning of some kind, into our business in such a way that it also offsets some of those challenges?
Are you ready to take your business marketing to the next level? Meet Brevo, the all-in-one CRM platform to help you connect with customers, boost engagement, and grow your business smarter. With Brevo, you can manage all of your customer interactions in one place, nurture leads with their built-in CRM, reach your audience through email and SMS, and keep them coming back with powerful automations. But here's where it gets really exciting. Meet Aura, Brevo's AI assistant. Aura helps you to craft smarter campaigns by suggesting personalized content, optimizing send times, and even analyzing performance data to help you improve your strategy in real time. It's like having a marketing expert on your team 24/7. And of course, Brevo offers advanced analytics, seamless integrations, and AI-driven personalization. Everything that you need to create multi-channel campaigns that hit the mark every time. And of course, Brevo offers advanced analytics, Get started for free today. Use code ANYTHING50 to save 50% on starter and standard plans for the first 3 months of an annual subscription. Just head to www.brevo.com/anything and take your marketing further with Brevo and Aura.
So the coaching is just all about being an affirmative, safe space to be able to process, to strategize, to prioritize, to hold yourself accountable, and to really make sure that you're leading with your strengths.
Nice. And can you tell us a little bit about the podcast, which is one of my favorites?
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I started the podcast when I first started The Introvert Entrepreneur, and I just posted my 150th episode. And the focus is, of course, introverts and entrepreneurship. And sometimes it, strays a little bit off the beaten path, but it's primarily an interview-based podcast where I'm talking primarily with other introvert entrepreneurs and sometimes an extrovert here and there. And often talking about what was their journey. I always start out with the question of, tell us where you fall on the spectrum and how that's influenced you as an entrepreneur or as a professional. And from that, we often get a lot of insights about how different introverts navigate their own particular challenges. And then I focus on whatever that person's expertise is, and hopefully leave listeners with some, again, like an affirmative and positive pieces of information and inspiration that they can apply directly to their life and to their work.
All right. So let's just jump right into it then. So the $1,000,000 question, what is an introvert?
Yes. First, can I answer with what it's not?
Yeah, I like that.
Because we often have a faulty definition of it. It is not shy. It is not antisocial. It's not someone who doesn't like people, like a misanthrope. Those tend to be the stereotypes that we have fallen into. And still, even despite the increase in information and conversation that we have today, I still see those words coming up in reference to introverts. So that's what it's not. What it is, I like to talk about it, is an energetic trait. So lots of times we talk about it as a personality trait, like that person is quiet or hangs out on the edges, or we talk about it in terms of how that person shows up socially. If you go back to the original definition and the genesis of introvert and extrovert from Carl Jung back in the 1920s, it has to do with where you gain and drain your energy. So an introvert will gain energy through solitude and lower stimulation environments, and drain energy during higher stimulation situations and social interaction. So notice I say it's not that we don't like those things. It's not that we're not good at them. It's not about our social skills. It's simply that it takes a lot of energy for us to be in those situations. And in order for us to be in those situations and to be healthy and happy and contributing, we need our solitude and we need our downtime, and we need that basically kind of to hit the mute button on life for a little while so that we can show up socially. And extroverts, while I don't like to talk of them as opposites, do fall on that sort of other end of the spectrum where they gain energy through social interaction and stimulation, and they drain energy if they have too much solitude and alone time or not enough stimulation coming their way. And what's important to recognize is that we all fall on a spectrum. So no one is 100% introvert, 100% extrovert. Some people might come close, but we all have both energies within us. And so I think of myself as maybe 75% introvert, 25% extrovert. And that extrovert piece is what enables me to kind of show up, do interviews like this, get up and do public speaking, and basically kind of project my energy out into the world. So in order to do that, I need that 75% of my time, basically, to be able to introvert, to turn inward, to recharge my batteries. So that's why I think of it as an energetic trait, kind of taking it away from that realm of talking about it in terms of your personality and whether you're bubbly and friendly and social or you're quiet and reclusive. Those are outward manifestations that may or may not be true for somebody. You can have an outgoing, gregarious introvert, but that person absolutely requires the solitude in order to be that outgoing and gregarious person.
Right. I remember how
liberating this was when I discovered
You and
about
me both.
it was incredible because it's like you said, understanding it more about energy. And that's when I realized that I guess what they call an ambivert, because I
Right.
fall right about in the middle, more on the introvert side. And so it started to make sense because sometimes after I do a training, we have, anywhere between 1 and 3 hours. And then afterwards, people want to come and talk to you and everything. I was so confused as to why I would just turn off after that. And
Yeah.
then my body would shut down. I would go into a, room
Yes,
by myself and fall asleep. And it would take me a long
exactly.
time to recover. But
Yeah.
now having a better understanding of that, it really helped me, especially when it comes to planning my day. And so I know when I'm going to have energy. And then afterwards, if I have to do a lot of interaction with somebody, interactions socially, I know that, okay, probably for an hour or two, I can't do any high level thinking because I need to
Right.
recover.
Exactly. Exactly. And your story about the public speaking or the training is so spot on. And I know a lot of introverts, a lot of the best public speakers are introverts. The hard part isn't getting up on stage and sharing the information or, teaching the class. It's the before and after that can be so exhausting. And especially the after, because like you said, people want to interact with you and talk with you. We gave it all we had out there.
Mhm.
And so it's like, we're like, I'm done. And
Yeah.
so we really have to work to, decide, how much do I have to give, and can I kind of hang in there a little bit longer, or do I need to draw a boundary? And how do you take care of yourself? So, yeah, that awareness can be really empowering and help you to feel less shame or guilt around that kind of reaction, because we think we should be energized and excited, but we're really not. And to know that that's okay. That's just kind of part of the gig.
That's awesome. So, what are some things that introverts could do using our special introvert powers
Mm,
to become more persuasive?
yeah. Introverts have some strengths that I think go hand in hand with persuasion. And there are two in particular. One is that we tend to be, and I'm always going to use that sort of tend to be because it's not universally true, but this is what kind of studies and anecdotes have shown. We tend to be really strong listeners, and we tend to instinctively want to put the spotlight on others. And I think those two things, when it comes to having a persuasive conversation or even a crucial conversation, are really part of the key to connecting with another person, and to finding that space where you can both walk away feeling good about the interaction. In my mind, persuasion, and I'm not sure, I'd be curious for you to define persuasion, because as I thought about it, I thought, to me, it's not about proving that you're right or that your idea is the best. To me, it's not about like convincing to the point of manipulating. It's about finding that common ground that's good for both people. And in the process, being able to honor, like a win for you is being honored to what's most important to you and the other person. And I think being able, those introvert superpowers of being able to really see and hear and listen to someone else, and to be able to put their needs also out on the table, not just always thinking of your own, are two things that they bring to those kinds of conversations that can help them be more persuasive.
Absolutely. And those are key because you need to be able to be a great listener. And in order to persuade effectively, you need to have a solid understanding of what issues and interests exist within the other party. So those are key skills. And to your point, with regard to my definition of persuasion, it would be
Hmm.
the act of getting someone to do something that they otherwise would not have done had you
Mm,
not had the conversation. You're absolutely right. It's not about being right or getting people to convincing them of your rightness. A lot of times you have a choice. You could either be right or you can be persuasive.
hmm.
And that's
Nice.
often what makes this process so difficult. So yeah, that I think that gives introverts a little bit of an edge when it comes to these conversations. What are some possible downfalls of being an introvert?
Oh, in some cases, it might be you listen too much, like you're not perhaps asserting yourself into the conversation. Like we can, if we're not careful, let someone else kind of take over. because we're not comfortable with interrupting, or we're not comfortable because interruptions are interesting. And I'd be curious about your take on them when it comes to persuasion and negotiation. But again, generally, extroverts tend to see interruptions as excitement. Like you're engaged, you're with me, you're in the conversation. And they almost, again, not always, and a lot of it depends on, sort of power dynamics and all of that. But typically, like if you don't interrupt them and you don't get to say what you want to say, they're going to say, well, why didn't you interrupt me? You should have stopped me. You should have just jumped in. So as introverts, though, we almost have the opposite response to interruptions. We tend to think of them as rude. It's kind of like, hey, I finally am getting to talk. Don't jump on top of me. Don't interrupt me. Let me say my piece. Again, it depends on the situation, the context. It might be okay depending, but generally speaking, introverts are less comfortable with interrupting and being interrupted. When it comes to persuasion or negotiation, for introverts, that might be something to pay attention to. Like if you feel like you're not getting your voice heard, or you feel like you are being kind of talked into submission, it's important to sharpen that skill of being able to politely and tactfully cut your way in. And it might be saying something like, can we just take a pause here for a second? Or I need to back up for a moment. Or would you mind if we stop for a second? I want to think about what you just said. Or I have a question. I use body cues, assuming you're in person, I raise my hand, real quick. Or, you try to use your body language to say, I need to get in here. And so that might sound like a small thing, but I think that it's actually a big thing, because if we don't develop that particular skill when we're having these kinds of conversations, we can get railroaded, or we can, get to that point where we're not getting to say what was really important. And then we leave the conversation either not getting what we came for, or feeling like we weren't heard. And I would hope that in a successful and in a productive persuasion conversation, that everyone feels heard. You might not always get what you want, but at least you got to say your piece. You feel seen and heard. And I think being able to have that dance of interrupting and not interrupting is very important to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard that point of introverts take interruptions a little bit more personally, but it makes it makes a lot of sense. I think back to when I'm talking to my wife and she interrupts me. I'm just like, well, I don't feel like talking anymore.
Yeah, shuts me down, doesn't it?
Yeah, I have momentum. It's gone. It's cool. Don't worry about it. And she's like, are you mad? I'm like, no, I just don't. I'm not feeling feeling it anymore. But with extroverts, I mean, they're always feeling it, so it doesn't really bother them. And another thing you said is you wanted to get my perspective on interruption. I always try not to interrupt during negotiations, one-on-one negotiations. I want to clarify that point, and I'll circle back to it, because when somebody's thinking and they have this line of thought running and you interrupt them, that line of thought, it doesn't stop. And so you might be talking, but they're still thinking through what it is that they would have said had you not interrupted. And so what ends up happening is that it's a moment of absolutely no communication, because they're still saying what they wanted to say. And because of that, they're not listening to you, and you're talking to somebody who's not listening. And so there's a moment of poor communication. And so I always try not to, unless it's like an emergency situation, if they materially misrepresent a fact. It's like, oh, wait, one thing there, before we get too deep on a line of thought that's just irrelevant or just uninformed. We should stop that and then apologize and say, okay, just wanted to jump in and say that, but go back. But in group dynamics, this was it's a little bit different, because when you're in a group, you always have the specter of groupthink. And when an idea or a perspective starts to take hold and build momentum, it's almost unstoppable when too many people in the group start to get on that train. So in group situations, if I see things going too far askew from where I wanted to go, I might jump in and have to interrupt in order to get things back on track, because it's easier to lose control of group dynamics there. But one-on-one, I try not to.
Yeah, great advice.
Yeah. And what advice would you have for extroverts when dealing with us as weird introvert folks.
So I was typing, I write to think, right? So I was thinking about these questions. And so when I typed this, I typed it in all caps. And I said, take time to listen more than you talk.
Ah,
I think that, to show really genuine curiosity and leave, ask good questions and then leave lots of space for that person to think. One important thing to remember is that this is another, again, generalizing, but often very true key difference between introverts and extroverts. Extroverts like to verbally process. So they think out loud. You ask them a question and they're probably going to start immediately talking because that's how they think. You ask an introvert a question or you make a statement and we think to think. we process internally. Our answer might not be immediate. Especially in American culture, we are uncomfortable with silence. We fill in that silence with all sorts of stories about what's going on. Did she understand the question? Does he not like me? Does he disagree? Does this not make any sense? Are they judging me? We come up with all these different stories. They didn't, they're going to say no, or they're going to say yes. We make up all these stories about that silence. And so we seek to fill it because it's really uncomfortable. So one of the best things that an extrovert can do is to recognize that an introvert processes internally. And when you ask a question or make a statement and you're looking for a response, get comfortable with silence.
that's brilliant.
Just leave that space. Leave that space so that they can speak when they need to. And if they say, let me think about that for a minute, or can I get back to you? Leave them space to do that. And when an introvert does start processing verbally, it can be a little bit rambling and long and, it's not our strength. And so let us process because, we kind of need to go through a few thoughts if we're kind of being forced to, think out loud. Give us the space to do that too, without interruptions and, just leaving lots of breathing room.
This is really interesting because in negotiation literature, they always talk about the need to remain silent and become comfortable with that uncomfortable silence. And strategically, it serves a lot of purposes. I've never thought about it from an introvert versus extrovert perspective because I'm thinking now for me, sometimes I might take a little bit of time to answer. And like you said, I'm processing before I begin to speak. But if somebody were to kind of talk through that process, now I'm not thinking. Now I'm listening again. And so
Exactly.
it makes my my process of cognition unnecessarily shallow when you could have gotten a better response if you waited.
Absolutely. I think extroverts can see, and I'm not usually prone to sports analogies, but this one really fits. I think extroverts can see a conversation like a basketball game. Think about how quickly it moves back and forth and there's constant turnover. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm like, one team has the ball and then all of a sudden the other team has the ball and you're like, wait a minute, how did that happen? And, sometimes it's a little bit hard to keep track because it's going so fast and it doesn't necessarily breathe until something goes wrong. A conversation that more ideally is going to be more like a tennis match. It's got a little bit of space. There are pauses. You're lobbing back and forth in a very sort of not prescribed or routine, but in a somewhat predictable and easygoing way. It's my turn, it's your turn. It's my turn, it's your turn. The turnovers don't happen as abruptly or as sharply or as unexpectedly. If you want to think of it that way as well, have your conversations be a little bit more like the tennis and less a little bit like the basketball.
Oh my gosh, that is brilliant. I love that. The first reason I love it is because tennis is undeniably my favorite sport. And then also it explains a lot of conversations that I've had because I have a friend who is the quintessential extrovert. What's funny is we used to do presentations together, which was hilarious because it's like as Kwame gets weaker, Charles gets stronger. And I can see
Picking up the
that.
slack.
Exactly. And now I can see it. His mind works like a basketball game. And that's how the conversations go. They're very exciting. But it's like, whoa, I'm exhausted now. Coach, take me out.
Yes, exactly. I need on the bench for a little while.
Yeah. Oh, that is brilliant. I love it. It's almost like you do this for a living. It's weird.
I know. It's really strange.
Okay. And kind of circling back to something we said earlier, I think some people might be surprised, for example, that I would consider myself anywhere close to introvert on the spectrum. And to your point, sometimes it's kind of hard to tell who is an introvert and who isn't. And so one of the things you mentioned was introverts need time to think in silence versus extroverts who typically think out loud. What are some other signals that you could use to determine whether or not somebody is more of an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, definitely, notice kind of their processing style. In terms of conversation and communication, that's really one of the key ones that I would look for. And then if you are the person, and maybe I'm coming at this from that perspective of you're the person that's sort of in control, so to speak, of the conversation, you're the one trying to do the persuading, ask the other person. And not necessarily, are you an introvert or an extrovert? But you can kind of feel around and test the waters like, I've got some thoughts I want to share. Is now a good time? Would you like to think about this? Do you want to just talk this through? Ask certain questions that might give them space to be able to say, like you might ask me, can we talk this through? And I might say, well, actually, if you could give me the questions and I could think about it, and then we can come back together and then I can talk to you. That's kind of a clue that I'm probably on that introvert side of the spectrum. Whereas the extrovert's going to be like, okay, let's brainstorm this right now.
Yeah.
Again, not asking that directly necessarily, unless you know the person and you just say, I tend to think that maybe you're an introvert and you might want to be thinking this through. Does that sound right? Would that be a good thing for you? Or would that lead to a more productive conversation? And let that person say, yeah, actually, that would be really helpful. Or no, I'm fine. Let's go ahead and do it. Ask about their communication preferences, and that's going to tell you a lot.
So for the listeners, I've been on Beth's show twice to talk about negotiation-ish type of stuff.
Yes.
And I created this freebie, the Introvert Guide to Negotiation. And so now I'm going to change it up a little bit and add a few more things to the guide, because I think it would be cool to have a few feeler questions on there that you could use to see if the person you're talking to is an introvert versus an extrovert.
Yeah.
Because I think that in negotiation and just conversations in general, but I see almost every conversation as negotiation. That's my thing. I should stick with it. So yeah, in any negotiation that you're having, I think that people often overlook the value of small talk, because negotiation is an information game, and that time spent in small talk is an opportunity for you to gather increased information. And that's when you could start to figure out whether or not somebody is an introvert, how they prefer to process information. And so I'm thinking things like, oh, how do you like to spend your time? Those type of things, to see if it's more extroverted or introverted in that sense. And then also maybe when we start to get into the meat of conversation, give A, B proposals. Would you prefer to talk this through? Would you just like to take this and think about it? And just asking little questions throughout to get an idea, a better profile of the person with whom you're negotiating.
Yeah. And they're going to appreciate that, And I would say as an introvert or an extrovert, if, depending on how it goes, like here's a quick example that has nothing to do with persuasion necessarily, but it has to do with about communicating and asking for what you want, or at least affirming what you want. I went to a new hairdresser yesterday. And I put it off for weeks and weeks and weeks. The one I had been with for like 7 years moved out of state, so I needed to find somebody new. And the thing that I dread is not so much like, oh, are they going to be good at their job? It's, are they going to talk my ear off? How can I send out signals, without necessarily being direct, like, please don't talk to me. But I kind of like to just sit in the chair. I don't want the small talk. I don't want to be like, oh, I live on this part of town, and no, I don't have children. And yes, I have a dog. I just sort of feel like being quiet and getting my hair cut, and kind of enjoying somebody else taking care of me for, 45 minutes. And so fortunately, this woman was she was rather intuitive, because, she asked me a couple questions just about my hair. And then I sat in the chair, and this is what I do. I just close my eyes. And typically most of them will pick up on that as a signal that I just want to be quiet. And she totally did. So when we were done with the haircut, I specifically made a point to thank her. I said, I don't know if you did that on purpose, but, I really appreciated that you, just left me space to sit there and be quiet, because that's just kind of what I wanted in that moment. And she said, oh yeah, I do whatever the customer wants. And some of them want to be entertained, and some people see it as, their me time, and they just want to be quiet. the reason I share this is also, it's not just at the beginning of the conversation, but the end. If the other person does something that you really appreciate, such as like, I really appreciated that you gave me time to think, or that you gave me the questions in advance, or that I had time to write down some thoughts, or that you asked me if it was okay if we brainstorm. I really appreciated that because it helped me to give you better responses, or to show up more fully, or to, get what I wanted out of the conversation. So even if it happens on the back end, to be able to acknowledge that person, and that reinforces it for them, and they say, oh, wow, okay, leaving silence and giving the other person time to think, that's actually a good thing. And I'm going to remember that for next time. It's not always on the other person to figure out what you need. It's also, you can articulate through both asking for it and affirmation what it is that's important, that helps you to show up and do your best.
This is fascinating. I love that story because, so that's positive reinforcement at the end, which makes it a lot more likely that they're going to do the right thing.
Yeah, in the future. Like you're paying it forward a little bit, because then the next person, they'll, maybe do the same thing. Exactly.
And also, this is probably like the third episode out of 4 that I've mentioned this particular principle, but you're utilizing the hairdresser, in a very subtle way, was utilizing the norm of reciprocity. Even though she didn't give you something that was tangible, she was able to feel you out and know what you want, and she gave it to you. And so for most people, they wouldn't even think of that as a concession or a gift of sorts. But on your end, it definitely registered as one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a consequence, I'll probably go back to her.
Exactly.
Plus, she gave me a good haircut. So
that is great. Yeah. When you were telling the story, it reminded me of how I feel when I'm entering an Uber. It's like, man, I don't really want to talk.
Exactly.
How do I
sort
signal
of avoided it for that reason. Exactly. And as I tell that story, it's like, in a way, we had a negotiation going on the whole time I was sitting there in that chair. Right. But it was a sort of a silent negotiation. And it didn't have anything to do with, words. It had to do with silence, and how we can use silence, how we can use body language to basically articulate what we want. And in some ways, my body language persuaded her to the fact that I just wanted to sit there, so please don't talk.
Yeah.
And yes, as you said, that was a gift.
That's beautiful. Do you have any tips for people who are introverts, where sometimes you might start to feel overwhelmed? Like, I am starting to get drained, but there is no escape for me. Is there some kind of socially acceptable way that you found to disengage from conversations when you start to feel burnt out?
There are a few expressions that I think some people have felt like they've gotten cliched, but I still think that they work, which is to say, sort of, I'm finding this conversation really helpful, or I feel like we're making progress, and I'm kind of reaching my bandwidth, or I'm kind of maxing out, or I can't remember what's the other expression that has something to do with bandwidth. But I find that those immediately, they're like a shorthand for saying, I'm oversaturated, I've reached my tipping point, and this has ceased to be productive for me, and I really want to be able to be fully present for you and for this. And so, is it all right with you if we take a break or a timeout, or can we come back to this tomorrow, or can we finish this up on email or in a phone conversation tomorrow? More often than not, it's not life and death. It's not something that has to be settled in the next 5 minutes. We forget that we don't have to come to closure in conversation 1 or in that particular moment. We can take space. Just as we are uncomfortable with silence, sometimes we're uncomfortable with just taking a little bit of extra time. So I think it's about noticing when you're hitting the wall and being able to articulate and say, I think I've reached my maximum point here of being able to absorb this and be a productive contributor. So it would really be beneficial, I think, to me, to you, to what we're trying to accomplish here, if we were able to take a break. Would that be all right? When would be good for us to come back to this? Again, asking for what you need and being somewhat fearless about it. Because rarely, like I said, rarely is it not appropriate or not an option to just take a little bit of time. Any false pressure or urgency that you're feeling, challenge that and say, is it really important that we figure this out right now? And if it's not, then give yourself some space.
This is almost turning into a coaching session, because you're helping me.
Am I hitting all sorts of points that have come up for you?
Yeah, maybe I'll change the name of the podcast again to the Introvert Negotiator, because I'm realizing that my style is kind of, and it's so funny. My style and the style that I teach is typified by my introvert negotiation style, because you think back a few episodes. I had the episode with a listener named Scott, and it was essentially a coaching call with him where we were trying to figure out how to shorten conversations. And then with my negotiation style, I always tell my my clients, it's like, listen, you don't need to end this negotiation today. It doesn't need to end in the first conversation. And so when I strategize, usually the first conversation I have is structured to be short. And I let them know beforehand that the conversation is going to be short. I just want to ask a few questions and get to know you. And I try to talk 10% of the time and get them to talk 90% of the time. Listen, end it in about 20 minutes and say, okay, let's come back and finish this tomorrow.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. Make it clear from the start that the expectation isn't that you're going to come to completion, that this is simply like, here, we're opening the door, and then the next time we're going to walk through it, and then the next time we'll figure out where we're going to sit down,
Right.
See it as stages and set it up that way, which can help you as the introvert pace and manage your energy.
Right. And I want to bring up another thing you said earlier, is that sometimes we put false pressure on ourselves. Well, actually, the other side puts false pressure on us. And
yes,
one thing I keep hearing from attorneys that are very experienced is that I'm not going to allow myself to make bad decisions under false deadlines.
Nice.
People just, whenever you get for instance, in the legal world, if you get a demand letter and it says, we need an answer in 10 days, it's like, no, you don't. You just made that up. You're going to chill and you're going to get an answer when I'm ready. And I think that's something that we could learn and utilize in our own negotiations, our everyday negotiations, and realize that these deadlines are, for the most part, made up, and you shouldn't allow yourself to make bad decisions because somebody wants to operate on their own time schedule.
Absolutely. Great point.
Very nice. Okay. So before you go, I'd like you to tell us one thing that introverts can do to become better negotiators.
This particular point is something we haven't talked about at all, and it's very simple. I would say everything we've talked about till now, plus one of the things introverts can forget to do, it's going to sound kind of silly, but we forget to say things out loud. I don't know about you, but my inner dialogue can be so robust and rich that I've literally asked my husband, like we've been driving in the car, and I will say, did I just think something or did I actually say something out loud? And he'll be like, you just thought it. And I'm like, okay, here's what I was going to say. And I noticed this, I think where I first experienced this was in preparing for presentations, like public speaking. I would practice it in my head. I'd sit in front of my laptop, I would scroll through my PowerPoint, and I would practice the presentation in my head. And that's fine. But where it really comes to life, where it becomes solidified, where I gain trust in myself, is when I actually say it out loud. And I don't think, because we process internally, I don't think that is particularly instinctual for introverts. It's like, I have to remember, oh yeah, I should say this out loud, and then I'll really know how it feels. Then I'll manifest it in a different way. It will become physical and part of me, as opposed to just a cerebral, intellectual exercise. So as you're going into these conversations, and situations, go ahead and lean into your introvert superpower of, thinking, processing, reflecting. Know how you're going to open up the conversation. That's often the most stressful part, is like that first sentence or that, sort of introductory phrase. And then practice saying it out loud to yourself in the car, in your walk-in closet, wherever it makes sense. But just practice saying it out loud and really feel it. And when you go into that conversation, it's not going to feel foreign coming out of your mouth, because you can think it 100 times. But when you say it, it takes on a different life. So I think one thing that we can do to be more persuasive, to be more trusting in ourselves, to be more confident and comfortable, is to remember that one little piece of your preparation. Prepare, think about what you want to say, practice saying it out loud, so that when you sit down, it just comes out naturally and it doesn't sound foreign to your ears. It sounds like it's you.
This is fantastic. And I think one of the reasons why it's so fantastic is that I think we can all relate to the idea of going into our bedroom, into our closet and saying, oh man, I should have said this and that. And, and you're saying those
Yes,
things
exactly.
aloud to yourself. And so I'm glad you normalized that for us. So we didn't think that we're privately weird. We're just
No,
humans.
we're just humans.
So
Yeah.
that's good. But yeah, I think that's something that a lot of times people overlook when it comes to their preparation. You don't
Mhm.
think of an actor saying, oh, I'm going to get ready for this play
Right.
by thinking alone. You
Exactly.
need to do it.